Good morning and welcome again to the Senior Citizens Advisory Commission's September 16th meeting. And I'm Noreen Bachteller. I'm a SAC co-chair, and I'd like to just let the audience viewing this that our commission meets from September to June on the third Tuesday of the month from 10 a.m. to noon. The Senior Citizen Advisory Commission is a 9-member advisory group appointed by the West Hartford Town Council to study and evaluate the needs of services for older adults in our town to assist in aging in place in our community. We work closely with the West Hartford Senior Center and the town social services and other local nonprofit groups providing transportation and job services for older adults. The Senior Advisory Commission most recently held programs on pedestrian and road safety for older adults, scam and fraud protection, and also a program on becoming an age-friendly community. Stay tuned for that. The SAC in 2024 held two very important programs looking at senior housing, and thanks to two of our SAC members, Kevin Ryan and Beth Rocco, we were able to host two well-attended forums on these topics. And while we see in West Hartford that affordable housing has increased with the expansion of fellowship housing and the new development at the Camelot and the L and some other properties, there is still a growing need and a gap for affordable and accessible senior housing. So today's program that we are presenting to you is, we're in grateful gratitude to town planner Todd Dumais as he pursued funding for a senior housing study. And this was something that the SAC had encouraged the town to get some data. We had some informal surveys done following those 2024 programs. We wanted to do more of a town-wide data collection on what are the needs of senior housing. So we're very fortunate today to have with us Dr. Don Poland and two members from the town's planning department. And I'd like to have Todd Dumais and Brian Polnick introduce our presenter, and thank you again for coming today.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Great. Good morning. My name is Brian Polnick. I am the senior planner for the town of West Hartford. I've been with the town since 2008. I've worked in various positions, and I've been in the role of senior planner for a little over 2 years now. I'm joined by Todd Dumais, who's town planner in the back, Kristen Gorski, who's sitting just in front of him, who's our economic development manager, and to my right here is Dr. Don Poland of Goldman & York, who I'll formally introduce in just a minute. We're excited to be here with you this morning to kick off this study. This has been strongly supported and requested by members of the Senior Housing Advisory Committee, and which is a continuation of past planning efforts, notably the town's Plan of Conservation and Development and the Affordable Housing Plan. The goal of the study is to develop a senior housing plan for the town, a plan which is based on market study of existing conditions and which will include updating relevant local housing data and housing characteristics. The study will also include various forms of community engagement to supplement the data collection and analysis, and will ultimately inform a series of actionable policy recommendations to ensure that West Hartford continues to serve the needs of its senior population and satisfy market demand. To assist the town in this effort, we've brought on Dr. Poland for his expertise, including his knowledge of West Hartford. Specifically, Dr. Poland helped us to draft the Affordable Housing Plan. Dr. Poland is a Senior Vice President, Managing Director, and Planning and Strategy at Goldman & York. He is a geographer, a planner, a community strategist whose work focuses on assisting communities compete for wealth and investment through strategic market, land use, planning interventions that build community confidence, foster pride in place, create governance capacity, and grow market demand. He has over 20 years experience in the public, private, nonprofit, and academic sectors. He offers a unique approach to addressing the social, economical, spatial governance, and policy challenges of creating and maintaining healthy, vibrant, and prosperous communities. Dr. Poland earned his PhD from University College London, Department of Geography, Cities and Urbanization program, and is a visiting lecturer in public policy graduate studies program at Trinity College in Hartford. He also lectures in geography and urban planning at the University of Connecticut and Central Connecticut State University. His research interests include the remaking of suburban space, urban and suburban histories, urban ecology, complexity theory, and creativity and innovation. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Poland for his presentation.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Hopefully everyone can hear me. A bit higher. This will work better. So it's my pleasure to be here today. I have a relatively short presentation, maybe a bit longer than I think it is, on some preliminary analysis that we've done around the senior housing market within West Hartford. I want to be clear, this is preliminary. We'll still be looking at data. Number two, this is just me presenting data. At this point, I don't have really any strong opinions or perspectives. I will share with how I interpret the data as I go through it. Just so you know, the slide deck, the pages, the text on the page, and the tables is small. Don't get frustrated. This slide deck will be available on the town website, and you'll be able to access it yourself. I am going to point out what's most important. I will speak through the data and tell you the numbers, and you will not be missing anything. The first 3 pages here, which this is one of, is really a 30,000-foot look at the senior housing market in the United States, with then a little bit of some local data. In general, it's a growth market. As a country, we are aging. That means there are more older households than there ever previously has been, and that has been generating demand for senior forms of housing. The growth rate is about 3.9% nationwide on a yearly basis. The value or cost of senior housing has also been growing. From a real estate investment perspective, it's viewed as a strong market, as a good investment. The age-restricted style housing, that is the 55 and older housing, without any services, basically competes at a similar value to the new housing market itself. There's not much difference there. When you get into the other forms of senior housing, whether that be, assisted living or more high levels of health care, memory care, and so forth, we start to see that the housing market starts performing a bit differently. And what I mean by that is the services start driving cost and price, not necessarily the housing that's driving the cost and price. So it's driven more by the services themselves. Just some other points here. 70% of older adults will need some form of long-term care, and roughly 9.5 million seniors nationwide live in senior care facilities. So that kind of gives the context to you. We've got this aging population, of which about 70% of will actually need some level of care that falls within these various categories, and ultimately is driving the market. The average age of a person living in senior living facilities is 75. So once again, that starts to point to the idea that the assisted living style of housing and other forms of elderly care typically serve the highest populations in age, much more so than the lower age, older population. So when you look at that age-restricted housing that doesn't provide any services, that starts at 55 years of age and above, you find the average ages in those developments lean towards the lower end, the 60-year-old, the 62-year-old, and up into the high 60s age cohorts. It's not until populations start getting into their 70s, especially their late 70s and 80s, where then the levels of care, that segment of the market, become critical. Three ways of defining this housing market are essentially independent living, that is the 55 and over without any, specific services. Home health care is then another way of looking at the marketplace. This shift to providing care within the home for two reasons. One, I think there's in some cases a cost efficiency to it, but also this desire of persons that want to remain in their home for as long as possible. And then the assisted living level, which can be very basic, providing basic level services, to very comprehensive, which include things like memory care and so forth. Three additional definitions that I believe show up on the next page are then the service enhanced housing, which is kind of a step up from the basic age restricted. Continuing care retirement communities, these typically have a multiplicity of level of services. You enter into maybe the just age restricted housing without services, and as your needs change over the course of your age, that you can transition within the same development into the level of care. And then ultimately nursing homes, which provide kind of the highest level of medical care. At the end of the day, we see kind of the largest share of this aging and this senior housing to be occurring more so in the western part of the country. Disproportionate amount of such housing in the west versus in the east, even though there's larger populations in the east. And that's most likely being driven by the climate in the west, especially when you look at the southwest and places like Arizona, the Phoenix region, that have a long history of aged communities and so forth. But the presence of this housing stock is nationwide, and we see a lot of it here in the Northeast, and especially here in central Connecticut and in West Hartford, which I'll talk more about later. So just some, on a national level, some costs, average costs in 2025. Home health aid, this is at a high level of service, not just 1 or 2 times a week. On average, costs about $80,000 a year nationwide. Assisted living, the average cost is at about $73,000 per year nationwide. Nursing homes is high. Private room is approximately $131,000 per year. Nursing homes, semi-private, around $115,000 per year. And adult daycare around $27,000 per year. You can see across all these categories, this is expensive. My general feeling is the work I've done around assisted living in Connecticut is that the costs probably run a bit higher in Connecticut than they do on the nationwide level. Unfortunately, my experience with nursing home facilities is more of the multiplicity of those that have de-licensed, removed their beds, and ultimately the properties have gone into bankruptcy. And I've dealt with those on a real estate level, but not on the kind of financial side of nursing homes. Once again, though, my gut would tell me that the prices, Connecticut's probably running higher than the national average in that category. The adult daycare becomes the most affordable option, although it may not serve the needs of all populations. But I think it's something, at least from a community basis, at least from a senior center basis, it's something that we can pay attention, be aware of, and it might be a way to provide, levels of service that can help, but not necessarily solve the needs of all households. The next section of this gets more into demographics and changing demographics. This slide starts with a look at research done by the Pew Charitable Trust in their research center. The Pew is probably provides some of the best unbiased research into a variety of issues, but especially into demographics and socioeconomics. So I like relying on them at times when I can. One of the things over the course of my career that I've always struggled with is how do you define middle income, or how do you define middle class? We all talk about it. We all think we know it. In the work I've done in poor communities and wealthy communities, I've come to learn that regardless of our income, we kind of all view ourselves as middle class and middle income. So it's a framework I like to start with, and I think Pew has done a good job of framing it. They basically say, they use median household income as the starting point, and then say the middle class starts at 2/3 or 66% of median household income, and it maxes out at double the median household income. So in the United States, median household income is approximately $80,000 per year. So Pew basically says that middle income households start at around 53,000 and top out at around 163,000. Anyone below that would be lower income, and anyone above that would ultimately be upper income. Our share of households in the context of low, medium, and upper income. This is 1971. 20% of households were lower income, while 61% were middle, and 11% were upper. You can see that lower income households have increased over time by 3% of total. But the biggest change has actually been the increase in upper income households, moving from 11% to 19%. And as we hear probably in media accounts, the middle income households and brackets have essentially contracted, become smaller at 51% there. But the greatest movement is actually on the upper end. This next slide I use to kind of break that down. I still go with the Pew definition. If we are talking about middle income households in America, they range between 53,000 and 161,000. But to provide some context, I think it's important to recognize that Connecticut, the Hartford region, and West Hartford are wealthier than the United States and that range of middle income. So the median household income in Connecticut is 91,000, about 11,000 more than the national. And that bracket would go from a low of 60,000 to a high of 183,000. In the capital region, the Hartford region here, as it's defined, median household income is actually a bit higher at almost 96,000, and that range goes from 63,000 to 190 for middle income. And then in West Hartford, the median household income is actually 111,000, actually almost 112,000. So that middle income range would then go from about 74,000 up to 223,000. So Connecticut's wealthier than the nation, or at least higher income, and then the Hartford region is wealthier than the state and the nation, and West Hartford also trends higher than all three of those other groups. For me, that's once again, it's a benchmark, it's a context, it's to, provide some understanding moving forward. The next slide, I then take a look at kind of the housing stock and characteristics of it. I think this is one of the biggest challenges facing Connecticut, and I'll explain that as I go through this. It's not just West Hartford, I want to be clear with that, it's the Hartford region and Connecticut that I think faces this issues. But if you look at the housing stock in the state, 65% is single-family residential. Probably not surprising. We're a mostly suburban state that developed in a mostly post-World War II time period. So that detached, single family housing is going to dominate the landscape. What's referred to as missing middle between 2-unit duplexes up to 9 units makes up about 25% of the state housing stock, and the multifamily makes up about 14. West Hartford's housing stock trends a little bit differently. The single family housing stock is around 71.4%, so much higher percentage of that kind of housing compared to the state. A little bit lower on that missing middle at 14.3, and the multifamily housing stock trends similarly at 14.3. I'll get back to that challenge in a moment after I do the other side of this. Yes.
This though is for all age groups.
This
This
is
ruling out seniors.
right. This is the total housing stock. So on the right-hand side, this table looks at housing stock by number of bedrooms. Statewide, 57% of the housing stock is 3 or more bedrooms, and in West Hartford, 64% of the housing stock has 3 or more bedrooms. The table at the bottom looks at occupied households, owner-occupied households, and renter households by size. This is the most dramatic kind of demographic shift we've seen over kind of the past 40 to 50 years. 29.6% of all households are single person. Another 33% are two-person households. So do the math, put those together. 1 and 2-person households make up over 60% of total households. When you get to the owner-occupied, it's a bit lower, 21% for single and 37.5% for 2-person households. When you get to the renter households, it spikes. 43% of renter households are single person and 27.9% are 2 persons. This is where the mismatch, it's in these data sets where I truly believe the mismatch happens statewide, in the region, and in West Hartford. The mismatch applies to all households, but I think it's pronounced when we talk about senior households. And that is, we have an older, larger housing stock that is predominantly single-family detached, right? That is overwhelmingly 3+ bedrooms. But we have a population today that is dominated by 1 and 2-person households. When we built this housing stock, we had much larger households with a lot more families, with a lot more children, and the housing stock met the needs of those past generations. Today, we have a lot more kind of households that are occupied by 20 and 30 somethings who are single or cohabitating. We have fewer married households, we have fewer family households, and we have a lot of empty nester households that are either single or 2-person. The fact is, our housing stock doesn't actually match very well with our households for the total population, but especially for seniors, right? If you are reaching a point where you're looking to downsize and finding a housing stock that better suits your needs with age, then the fact is the existing housing stock doesn't do a good job of that. We don't have a lot of rental product. We don't have a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom product. We don't have a lot of higher density, not, single family detached. So we have this mismatch between the needs of households, the characteristics of households, and the housing stock that's ultimately available. Looking more specifically at West Hartford, actually these 2 tables are the same as the prior slide. This table is what changed. So this table is provided by the U.S. Census data on the breakdown of housing types. And then this table is provided by your tax assessment's office on their records and housing types. The numbers are slightly different. I'm not surprised by that. It is kind of what it is, but they actually trend pretty similarly. The nice thing is within your assessment data, we can actually pull out and identify there's 513 assisted living units in your community. There's 1,309 nursing home, rehab style units in your community. And there's 508 housing authority units in your community. Not that they all service just seniors. We do recognize that some of the nursing facilities and even some of the assisted living units may exist in the context of they are physically there and they are being taxed by the tax department based on what they are, but that some of these developments may have shuttered, some of these units may not be available and so forth. But it does give us a context that about currently right now, 6, 7, 8, approximately 9% of the housing stock is actually geared towards 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 or 8% of the housing stock. I'm awful with math on my feet. Is geared towards an aging population. So that's a relatively decent starting point. The next slide is a big picture. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but it breaks down the population by generation. The youngest populations are shown here at the bottom: Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and Gen Y are also known as the millennials. The millennials stretch up to 44 years old today and make up about 22% of the nation's population. If we're looking at senior housing, then from a data standpoint, I'm most interested in Gen X, whose current age runs from about 45 to 60. The baby boomers that run from 61 to 79, and the silent generation 80 to 97. The baby boomers and the silent generation are solidly within this senior housing market. And then Generation X, my generation, is the next generation that's going to be moving into it. So that gives us about a 20-year horizon of kind of where these populations are heading, and give us an opportunity to think a little bit about demand, at least. So, and then this narrative, when you guys finally have the ability to look at this, it just kind of describes maybe the social differences between each of these generations. And I'll talk more about that in another section. So my apologies on the smallness of these tables. The data here basically across all of these is looking at either 2020 data, which is from the census with a high degree of reliability. The rest of the data is sourced from Esri, which is a third-party data provider for 2025. We just don't have census data for the current year. Esri does a great job of projecting and estimating data, but I just want to make clear, if I say a 2025 number, it's an estimate. If I say a 2020 or a 23 number, it's a U.S. Census data number, and it's probably a bit more accurate. So this is West Hartford population compared to the planning region, compared to Connecticut, compared to the U.S. over here. And they're just raw numbers. You know, total households, 26,000 in West Hartford. Total population, 64,000. Over here, we have the 2025 numbers. Total households have increased to 26,277, and total population has actually decreased to 63,413. This is that kind of change in household structure, right? Our number of households are increasing, but the total population is contracting because our households are getting smaller. That there's more one and two, there continues to be more 1 and 2 person households than there is 3 and 4 or more person households. That becomes important once again in the context of an aging or a senior population. The two populations that are most likely to be single person or 2 person households are your youngest 20-something-year-olds, right? You graduate college, you get a roommate, or you get your own place, or your empty nesters. You hit an age where your kids are now gone, you are just a couple, and as you age out, the likelihood is one's lifespan will exceed that of another, and the 2-person empty nesters become a single-person empty nesters. So those bigger population trends help to inform us in that area. West Hartford's average household size in 2025 is 2.34 persons, which runs lower than the planning region, the state, and the U.S. as a total. By comparison, the average household size is 2.5 on a national level. Your median age also runs higher. The U.S. median age is 39.6. West Hartford is 41.4. The region slightly below that in Connecticut is 41.8. We in Connecticut, in our Connecticut communities, have been older than the national average for decades now, probably going all the way back to the 1990s. We are more aged and we are kind of aging quicker. That being said, the national rate of an aging population, or the median age of the nation moving up, has accelerated in recent times. That's the baby boomer generation. It was the largest generation ever until the millennials came along. They're larger because our population has grown, but the baby boomers are still larger as a percent of total population, as a generational cohort themselves. So the baby boomers are the ones who are kind of driving our aging population. West Hartford's senior population, you have approximately 21% of your households, or 13,000 households, that have at least one person 65 years of age or older in it. And that runs higher than the national average of 18.75 and slightly higher than the state and region average, which are also in the 20 percentile. These two numbers become very interesting to me. Median household income of that senior population in West Hartford is $79,000, compared to the national average of 56, compared to the region of 64 and the state of 64. So once again, Connecticut's wealthier than the nation. Our senior populations are wealthier than the nation's senior populations. And West Hartford seniors populations are wealthier than both. And 2025 average household income, which always runs higher than median, also spikes up higher, same trend lines compared to the other three. And then 2023 households, so this is census data, population over 65, shows about 33% of households with persons over 65 years of age. Next slide. This basically breaks down the population by age cohorts based on the census data, 45 to 49 here, then 50 to 54 here, 55 to 59 there, and then stepping up 60 to 64, up to 74 there, and 75 to 79, 84 80 to 84, and then 85 plus. A lot of numbers. The only line that matters on this slide is this one here. For the younger populations, the under 75 populations that are over 45, West Hartford basically tracks with the state of Connecticut and the region really well. Runs a bit older than the nation, but the three, West Hartford, the region, and the state, track together. It's when we hit 75 plus across all three categories. The national average for 75 to 79-year-olds is 3.7% of the population. For West Hartford, it's 4.1. For 80 to 84-year-olds, the national is 2.3. West Hartford is 2.6. And for the 85 plus, the national is 2.0. And West Hartford is 3.3. You guys have a meaningfully older population at the top end. So at the current moment, I could start saying demand would be stronger in West Hartford for senior housing than other places. Yes.
I have a question about
Sure.
these numbers here. You're calling them households. Does that mean you are or are not including the people in assisted living and nursing homes and that type of thing?
Yep. In these total numbers here, those populations are likely captured. They're identified, or someone in an assisted living facility. So let me be clear. Someone in independent living, just an age-restricted housing unit, falls within the normal census. Persons that are in institutional circumstances, college kids in dorms, senior populations in a nursing home or assisted living facility, persons in a correctional system, they fall into what's called institutionalized populations and are treated differently within the census, but they would be captured here in these total percentiles. And some of your existence of that housing may be ticking those numbers up. I've done similar look at data in Bloomfield, which has Doncaster and Seabury, which are large facilities. And they're a smaller population than West Hartford overall. You can see the skew that's being created in the demographics by those facilities. I'd say it's more muted here in West Hartford.
We know from the school population here in West Hartford that we lose about 100 students every year. And I just read that they expect that to continue into 2030. So
Yeah, it gets back to those trends of A, we're aging, B, we marry less, C, when we do marry, we marry older, D, when we have kids, we tend to have them older than we used to, and then last is we have fewer kids when we do have kids. So the national trend is a decline in enrollments. I just looked at the whole capital region for school district enrollments. Since 2007, 26,000 enrollments have been lost. At some point I looked at West Hartford. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head though, but you guys have been in decline on those lower ends. So, as I said, right now you are running older, and that's important to know. But because you're running older in the 75 plus category, and you're middling kind of in the 45 to 75 range, I'll say this as kind as I will, as kind as I can. The 75 plus population will pass quicker. So my preliminary look at kind of demand, you probably have a 10-year time window on this expanded kind of demand. So the near to midterm of 5 to 10 years is, yes, you have a lot of senior population. When I look at the population demographics overall, this is the raw data on the right. These are the various cohorts. If I skip ahead out into the future, then I can say on the 10 to 20 year horizon, your demand is going to soften. That there's going to be fewer older people based on the way the population looks. These are called age pyramids. They break the population into male on the left, female on the right, by 5-year cohorts, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, all the way up to 85 plus. And so this is for West Hartford on the left. This is for the Krog region on the right. In general, fairly similar structure. This dotted line on either side, though, is Krog mirrored over West Hartford. And what you see is up here, you have more 85 plus than Krog. You're running a little bit higher there, and you're running a little bit higher there. As we come down, if you get into the 60-year-olds cohorts, Krog is actually running older than you as West Hartford. So that's where I'm seeing this kind of projecting this out into the future. Your most aged population is going to contract a bit. The next slide just provides the Connecticut and the nation, just so for your viewing enjoyment, they can be looked at in more detail. The last section of this presentation is called Tapestry Segmentations. And I need to explain this a little bit. See how I'm doing on time. How many of you have a Stop and Shop or other supermarket customer card? You know, that card you swipe before you ring up your stuff. How many of you have that? Raise your hand. We all do, right? So when you go into Stop and Shop or Big Y or wherever, and our typical thing is we swipe the card, then they ring up our groceries, we pay, we get some discounts, that's why we have the card, and we move on. But if you think about it, every time you swipe that card, they know what day of the week you come in, they know what time of day you come in, they have your home address, they really only care about the zip code, they generally know where you live, and they actually know everything you buy every week, right? So, there's companies like Esri that then purchase that data from all of the grocery stores. We do the same thing with our ATM cards, right? We run around and we tap them everywhere. We go out to dinner, we go to the gas station, and a company like Esri buys that data too. They compile all this consumer spending data into a giant database. They tie it back to the zip code that the cards are associated with. And then they can start to compare it to census data. They know the income of a household, the education level, the median age of the population that lives in that zip code, and they know their consumer spending behaviors. And then they hire psychologists, sociologists, and anthropologists, all these behavioral scientists, to run focus group and interview people from these various zip codes and so forth. And they compile what's called Tapestry. And it's a product that's used a lot in market research because it tells us a lot about the population. They just, for the first time in about 20 years, upgraded their definitions, but they basically break out the US population into 68 different groups of people. And they give them names like savvy suburbanites, an emerging hub, and the moderate metros, and the kids in kites, and so forth. And to those of us that use this data all the time, these names actually mean things. They tell us about the population. So when I showed that slide of the generations, and I said there's a narrative describing the generations and kind of their behaviors, These describe populations and their behaviors. There's some interesting stuff here with West Hartford. And basically what I call out is two categories. Your number 5 tapestry segment, which makes up 9% of your households, is called retirement communities. Your number 6, burbs and beyond, makes up 5.7% of your households, also has a retirement age bent to it. There is down here, don't yell at me for missing it. There's one called Social Security Set. And I just want to be clear, it actually doesn't focus on an aging Social Security population. It focuses on a Social Security disability population, which doesn't tie actually to age. So that's why I don't have it highlighted. I just want to preempt that if anyone sees it, because usually when it shows up, people are like, why didn't you include that? So the next slide kind of breaks down and shows these comparisons. We have the percent here, 9%. The average age in this group, the retirement communities, is now 55. So far higher than that 41.6 for West Hartford itself. Its income, and my eyes are giving me problems here. The income level is around 80,000, I believe. The net wealth is around 263,000, and the median home value for this group is around 466,000. All of those numbers make sense to me in the context of this population, in the context of a West Hartford community. The more interesting thing here is not really these specifics of these data groups. Oh, the burbs and beyonds, they're a bit wealthier in median household income, also in net worth, and a little bit lower, I think, in home value. That's because they're still working a bit more. This is your 55s to 65s, more so than the 65 pluses. So economically, they show a bit stronger. But what's more interesting to me here in the context of understanding West Hartford, if we cumulatively total, these 14 groups make up 100% of your population. But the CROG regions, 20 groups only make up 86% of the population. So there's more than 20 tapestry segments across the CROG region, but only 14 of them show up in West Hartford. And that starts narrowing in on some of this maybe uniqueness to West Hartford. Some of its income, some of its education level, some of its consumer behaviors, the fact that you have 2 Whole Foods, the fact that you have this high-end dining in town center. Those things are going to start differentiating your population from other places. But then also, as we already know from the other data sets, you're running older on these retirement community populations than other places. So that's also influencing. So there is some uniqueness to you here. The next 2 pages give a detailed explanation of who the retirement communities are. Just some of the narrative to give you a flavor of it. These neighborhoods are spread across metropolitan areas, both large and small. Most have settled in the suburbs. A quarter of the population consists of people aged 75 years and above. You guys probably match with that quarter of the population above. Many households depend on a mix of retirement funds, investment income, and Social Security and other forms of public assistance, while just over half also earn wages and salaries. So a fair portion of this population is still working, even if it's just, say, part-time employment. Households typically earn middle-tier incomes. We see that in this community. Accrued net worth tends to be above the national average. Many are active in the workforce with employment in professional sectors such as education, healthcare, management, sales, and technology. Most residents live in single-family homes, duplexes and apartments, and rents exceed the national average. Additionally, many assisted living and nursing facilities are found in these communities. It's actually probably a really good definition, of describing a cohort of population within West Hartford. Just for the record, only once in my total career using this data, it was a community I lived in. I volunteered my time to help them out with some data analysis. I ran the tapestries, and there were only 3 segments in the community. I've never had a community with just 3 segments. Usually there's 10, 12, 20 or more, and it was just 3. And I've never read definitions that match a community so perfectly. It was just like, wow, that is really scary. But my point being is that this tapestry stuff gives us a really good take on kind of the makeup of the community. So the next page is for that retirement community cohort. It gives a specific breakdown of median age 55, household size 1.94, ownership rate 59.9%, then some income stuff, rent burden 46%, or rent burden, labor force participation 52.3%, are still working, unemployment rate at 3.6%, and 50% have a bachelor's degree or higher. Then talks about some of their consumptive behaviors, where they shop and so forth. Same thing for the burbs and beyond, and then the detail. We see these are a little bit younger, 51.1, 2.39 for median household size. So these are your not yet empty nesters that still have the 27-year-old living in their basements that just hasn't moved out yet, right? Net worth runs a bit higher, income runs higher, and so forth. Labor force participation is higher at 57%, and once again, some of those behaviors. I believe that is the last of my slides. So just some preliminary thoughts from me. The biggest challenge facing Connecticut, I think, with a senior population and facing West Hartford is this mismatch in housing stock. We have a housing stock built for prior generations with larger households, larger families, that doesn't match well with the needs of an aging, smaller household, senior population looking to downsize. At this point, I don't want to preordain solutions. We still have more work to do. We still have feedback to gain. But I think it's that disconnect where the biggest issue resides. If it's okay with you, I'll take some additional questions at this point, if anyone has them. Yes?
When you were going through the housing unit numbers,
Yep.
I don't think there was anything about over 55 with no services and how many what the numbers were in West Hartford.
Yeah, we're trying to pull data specifically on that. They're harder to identify. From an assessment standpoint, the assisted, the nursing homes, those jump out really easily. From a market standpoint, units, the over 55 just kind of blend into the rest of the market. So my staff right now are using other means of trying to identify that 55 and older stock. So hopefully we'll have better numbers soon. Yes, sir.
So, thank you for the presentation.
Yep.
Someone's been knocking around in this area for about 4 or 5 years now. And the data that you represent is species in terms of this over 60-year-old single-family homeowners. That's a tough spot. Here's what we've been looking at. The data's great, but to just look at it sort of simplistically.
Yep.
The numbers we could get, assessing obviously helped us with this a couple of years ago. It looks like about 27% of the households in West Hartford are owned by people 60 years old. That's an interesting number.
Yep.
Most interesting about that is the data that also suggests that half of that population are single population homes. So we have a lot of houses, as you pointed out, built at a different time. But the reality is this: we're not going to knock those houses down.
Right.
On the other side of it, we're building, over 1,000 units right now. A lot of them aimed at young professionals.
Yep.
So if you project out 10 years, I mean, the numbers exist, 20, 30, there are more 60-year-olds, and more 65-year-olds and 16s, et cetera. But here's the question, or the hypothesis anyway. Those 1,000 units, young professionals, within 10 years, we think a bunch of them are going to match up, and they're going to become families who do want to live in this community because they like the community. And young families use houses that are built larger. So the trick for us, and where we've been struggling, is, quote unquote, the empty nesters aging in place. Very challenging to lure them out of those houses. But if we could, this landlocked population would have housing for younger families, would keep younger families in place.
Yep.
And that's sort of the dilemma. We can't change the fact we're landlocked. Suggesting we buy a few other communities around this, but we haven't figured that out either. But the reality really is, the data is dynamic. It is typical. We do have a higher senior population. And as a member of the silent generation, we're living longer.
Yep. Yep.
Some of us plan.
Yep.
So it's going to be a slower transition, I think, than some of the data suggests.
Yeah.
On one side.
Yep.
And on the other side, a town really needs young families to really grow. So it's important to try and figure this out. So we have the term, we call it age-appropriate housing.
Yep.
Not really in the census data yet, but
Yep.
what is age-appropriate housing? Well, it's a different type of housing, generally one level. To the extent it's possible, it's property that the owner has an equity interest in. Not necessarily older folks, particularly my generation, tail end of depression. We don't like to be renters. We like to have stake in the game.
Yeah.
Stake in the game. So that's an element of how one creates. Comes to mind, oddly enough, co-ops would be a way to do that, but they have a whole set of issues as well.
Yep.
But we're really trying to find more creative solutions, either economics combined solutions, some kind of co-housing solutions. That's what we'd like to see come out of your study.
One, you framed the problem perfectly. I thank you for that. Running through my mind was like what you were describing is the Rubik's Cube we're playing around with. Like, how do you meet the needs for different ages within the housing stock? And it's not matching right now. Skip ahead 20 years, it may match better.
Yeah.
All that new apartment 1 and 2 bedroom product, which hopefully those younger persons will have moved out of and into the home ownership 3 bedroom plus houses, now may actually serve a place in the marketplace for that aging population, but at the current new construction values isn't necessarily meeting that. So you've framed it perfectly, and it's kind of my job moving forward to better figure this out, find some creative solutions, and see what the community can do. I'm just not there yet. But I think part of it is we also need greater feedback from the community, which we're working on, to further understand this. But I couldn't have said it better than you did. So you've put a lot of time, thought, and effort into it, that's for sure.
Well, what's interesting to us as we go forward is how that new information is going to be acquired.
Yep.
Segregated.
Yep.
And how we can cooperate with the two.
Yep.
We're a wild bunch.
And you should be. So. Anyone else?
Just one other question.
Yes.
You didn't speak to the mismatch of caregivers. And I look around and I see a lot of nursing homes and assisted livings closing because they can't attract the caregivers, and how the new administration and deportation and the lack of immigration, those are a lot of the workers that take up those places.
Yeah.
Now, if seniors want to stay in their own homes, whether it's a downsized home or the home they're in now, they're going to need help.
Yep.
And that is my biggest concern, is the safety of our 85-year-olds in these big homes living by themselves.
Yep.
And it would be great to get some of those numbers, because that might entice some people who think that they are God Almighty and they're going to be 95 and still going into their basements and doing their laundry. It may be a scare tactic to, hey, you know, do I really want to stay here, or should I be staying here?
Yep.
And what type of help can I get?
Yeah, and that draws this housing matter out into a wider area of kind of care and services for this population. Just so you know, I'm extremely sympathetic to this. I felt like you were describing my daily life. My mom is 86. She remains in her house. After probably about 4 years of weekly fights, I think I've finally gotten her to stop going into the basement for laundry. We do have someone that comes in twice a week for a few hours, primarily to go into the basement and do laundry so mom doesn't go down there. And also help with some cleaning and so forth and so on. But every now and then I float the idea of alternative housing to my mom. I just did it about a week and a half ago, and she tore my head off that she's not leaving. That being said, she also has memory issues that are starting to reach the point where I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. So I live this on a daily basis, and that care side is extremely important, the costs around care, and I'm not confident. Well, I'm hopeful I can provide some solutions on the housing side. I'm not confident I can solve that, but I am confident that we will be considering that as we go through this. That if we can't solve all the housing issues, are there ways that the town can play a role in some of those other issues? So.
In commenting on older clients moving into some of this young professional housing, the problem that I see with it, and I'm going to top you, my mother is 95 in her own home. She now has a 24/7 aid provided through Medicaid.
Yep.
You cannot have a 24/7 aid unless that person has a separate den or a bedroom, so that all of these studios and one-bedroom apartments that have been built in town with bathtubs become inappropriate for senior housing.
Right.
And I often say that we don't need the modifications like they show you on the Tunnel to Towers, commercials where there's pull-down cabinets and everything. No, you just need a flat shower, and you need a secondary bedroom if you really want to stay put, because those are the rules of the state. And the other surprising thing is if you have an in-care home giver, and a person has exiting behaviors where they're trying to get out, the home agencies will no longer do that.
Right.
So what I see with the aging population is a greater need for mental health, Alzheimer's units, and all of those units have huge waiting lists.
Yep.
And what are we doing? What are we doing about that?
Yep. Waiting lists and very high cost of memory care becomes the most expensive in the assisted living realm. So, anyone else? I'll turn it back to you if you have anything, Brian.
Thanks, Don, or Dr. Poland, sorry.
That's fine.
Excellent dialogue. Really appreciate the questions. The presentation was obviously very content-rich. As Dr. Poland indicated, we will have that available on our website for you guys to kind of take a deeper dive into and try to digest some of those numbers. So thinking about next steps, there was a question around, okay, well, how are we going to be gathering some of this additional data that we're going to use to develop this study and plan? And so that's going to come from a survey that we're in the process of developing. We're actually taking a survey that was developed by AARP and it was excellent, really great survey. They covered a ton of ground. And so we're taking that and sort of modifying a little bit to suit West Hartford's needs. And so we're working on that now, and we'll have that distributed sometime, I'd like to think, in the next couple of weeks. And so we're going to do that in a couple of ways. We will have links to that survey on our website. We can certainly email it out to any groups that you folks are connected with. We will have printed copies available in senior centers, in libraries, and I think we even talked about potentially providing printed copies into some of the assisted living facilities and so on that are in town, so that we can try to spread as wide a net as possible. In addition, and this is still something that we're kind of fleshing out, is we'd like to conduct a more concentrated focus group to kind of delve into individuals' specific thoughts on the issue and kind of their own life experience. And so that's something that we'll have more information on also in a little bit. But I think that's all we had for today. Really happy all of you could join us to hear about the study, the kickoff of the study, and we're excited to get working on it. So thank you again.
Thank you from the commission. Thank you both for coming, and we look forward to hearing more about your work and how we can participate in this study. And any ideas, I'm sure we can share back with Todd and with Brian and have you back maybe for what you're finding as you go along in this process.
Absolutely.